My boss fired me to cover his own mistakes. 6 months later, I bought his entire company. The morning Daniel Hargrove fired me, he was wearing a blue tie. I remember that detail because I stared at it the entire time he was talking. I couldn't look him in the eyes. Not because I was ashamed, but because I knew if I looked at him directly, he would see that I already knew exactly what he was doing. And why. My name is Ryan Cole, and this is the story of the worst morning of my life and what I did with it. I joined Pinnacle Solutions at 26 years old, mid-size B2B sales company out of Charlotte, North Carolina. We sold enterprise software packages to logistics companies, and we were good at it. The office had that specific kind of energy where everyone pretended to be fine, but was quietly exhausted all the time. You know the type. I came in as an account manager. Within 8 months, I was the top performer on the floor, not by a little, by a lot. I was closing deals that my colleagues had been chasing for quarters. I wasn't trying to make anyone look bad. I was just working. Head down, phones up, results delivered. Daniel Hargrove was my direct manager. On the surface, Daniel was everything a manager is supposed to be. Good handshake, great vocabulary, always the first one to laugh at the CEO's jokes during all hands. Meetings. He took credit smoothly. The kind of smooth where you don't even notice it's happening until later, when you're alone replaying the conversation and thinking, wait a minute, I noticed eventually. The Hendricks Group account was mine. I built that relationship from a cold email, 14 follow-ups, 3 product demos, 1 dinner where I paid out of my own pocket because the expense report was taking too long. I closed that deal at $340,000 annually, the largest single account our regional office had landed in 2 years. Daniel presented it to the executive team. Not we presented, not Ryan's team presented, Daniel presented. His name on the slides, his voice in the room, his handshake with the VP of sales afterward. I stood in the back of that conference room and watched. It happened and told myself it was fine. That's how corporate works. That's the game. Keep performing, keep delivering. The right people will notice eventually. I was wrong about that. 6 months into my second year, Pinnacle lost 3 major accounts back-to-back. Not because of anything I did. These were legacy accounts that Daniel had been mismanaging for years. Pricing disputes, service failures, ignored escalation emails. The kind of slow-motion disasters that happen when a manager is too busy building his personal brand to actually do his job. Leadership was asking questions. I know this because our office administrator, Tina, had worked at Pinnacle for 11 years and had the institutional memory of a court reporter. She told me quietly one Thursday afternoon, "They're looking for someone to put this on, Ryan. Just be careful." I appreciated the warning. I wasn't careful enough. 2 weeks later, Daniel called me into his office. Blue tie, folded hands. The specific facial expression of a man who has rehearsed this conversation in the mirror. He told me that due to performance inconsistencies and a pattern of client communication failures, Pinnacle Solutions was terminating my employment effective. Immediately. Performance inconsistencies. Me, the man whose numbers had carried that office for 18 months straight. I asked him to show me the documentation. He slid a folder across the desk, a thin folder, the kind that tells you everything. Was assembled in a hurry. Inside were 3 client complaint emails, all from accounts I had inherited from other reps, all from issues that predated my involvement by months. He had found the receipts that were closest to my desk and handed them to HR. That was it. That was the whole play. I looked at that folder and then I looked at Daniel Hargrove and I said very quietly, "Okay." I signed what I needed to sign. I collected my things. I shook Tina's hand on the way out because she looked like she was going to cry, and I didn't want her to feel worse than she already did. And then I sat in my car in the parking garage for 22 minutes without starting the engine. I wasn't crying. I wasn't panicking. I was thinking. I want to be honest about what the next few weeks actually looked like. because it wasn't clean or cinematic. I filed for unemployment and got it. I ate through my savings slower than I expected and faster than I was comfortable with. I applied to 14 jobs and heard back from 4 and got rejected by all 4 in the same week, which is its own special kind of exhausting. I went on runs every morning not because I was suddenly disciplined, but because it was the only hour of the day where I wasn't thinking about money. And then one night, somewhere around week 5, I stopped feeling sorry for myself long enough to get angry. Not the hot, unfocused kind of angry. The cold, clarifying kind. The kind that asks, "What exactly are you going to do about this?" I pulled out a notebook, actual paper, actual pen, and I wrote down everything I knew about the B2B software sales industry. The gaps I had seen, the inefficiencies, the things clients complained about that nobody was solving, the conversations I'd had with buyers who were frustrated not just with Pinnacle but with the entire category of vendors they were stuck choosing between. By the time I stopped writing, it was 2 a.m. and I had 9 pages. One idea kept coming back to the top. Pinnacle. And companies like it sold software packages that were bloated, overpriced, and required weeks of onboarding. The buyers, mid-sized logistics companies, didn't need everything in those packages. They needed 3 or 4 specific tools that talked to each other cleanly. Nobody was selling them that. I knew the buyers. I had their cell phone numbers, saved in my personal phone because I'd been the one building those relationships. I called my former client, Marcus Webb, at Trident Freight on a Tuesday morning. Told him I'd left Pinnacle. Told him what I was thinking. He said, "And I will never. Forget this. Ryan, if you build that, I'll be your first customer. And I'll send you 2 referrals before you even invoice me." I started building. The next 4 months were the most focused I have ever been in my life. I contracted a developer through a freelance platform. I lived on that notebook and those 9 pages of ideas. I did customer discovery calls every single day, not selling, just listening, asking logistics managers what they actually needed and writing down every word they said. I launched a bare-bones version of the platform in month 3. It was not impressive. It was functional. There is a difference. And in the early days, functional beats impressive every time. Marcus Webb signed up. He sent 2 referrals. Those 2 sent 3 more. By month 5, I had 22 paying customers and $31,000 in monthly recurring revenue. By month 6, I had enough traction to take a meeting with a small private equity group that a friend of a friend connected me to. They moved fast. They liked what they saw. The term sheet came in on a Thursday. I signed it on a Friday. And it was the following Monday when I got the call from my new investors that I will carry with me for the rest of my career. One of the partners had done some background research on the competitive landscape, companies in the region that were struggling, potentially acquirable, strategically relevant. Pinnacle Solutions was on the list. They had lost 4 more accounts since I left. Daniel Hargrove had been quietly demoted. The company was generating negative press from a former enterprise client that had gone public with a service dispute. Revenue was down 31% year over year. They were looking for a buyer. My investors thought it was worth exploring. I told them I was familiar with the company. The acquisition closed 8 weeks later. I want to tell you that there was a big, dramatic moment. That I walked into that building and Daniel was standing in the lobby and our eyes met across the room and the whole thing played out like a movie. It didn't happen like that. Daniel had already resigned by the time the paperwork was final. Most of the leadership team had. What I inherited was a depleted client roster, a tired but talented sales floor, and Tina, who had stayed through everything, standing at the front desk with a look on her face that I can only describe as quietly. Satisfied, she said, "Well, this is something." I said, "Yeah, it is. I kept the best people. I rebuilt the accounts. I integrated Pinnacle's remaining client base into my platform and eliminated the bloated infrastructure Daniel had spent years defending. Within a year, what had been 2 separate companies became one, and it was profitable." Here's what I know now that I didn't know the morning I sat in that parking garage. The people who move pieces around to protect themselves always leave something behind. A paper trail, a pattern. A team full of people who watched what happened and remembered it. You cannot build anything lasting on a foundation of taking credit for other people's work and hiding your failures under their names. Eventually, the math catches up. You just have to be patient enough and hungry enough to still be standing when it does. I wasn't fired because I failed. I was fired because someone was afraid of where I was going. And the funny thing about that? He was right to be. Have you ever been blamed for someone else's mistake at work? And how did you handle it? Tell me in the comments. I want to know.